AA6DD, K6YYL.
Good morning, Kim. K6YYL, AA6DD.
Good morning, Will. I guess we were going to talk about antennas, portable antennas kind of stuff. Vertical, horizontal, loops. What is the best for portable and situations, I guess?
Yeah, Roger, we want to talk about portable and mobile antennas. You know, it's very important for ham radio operators to all be competent at both mobile and portable operation, because that gives you a whole new dimension for emergency communications you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And the first thing to do is to first install, even when you want to go portable, to actually have a good quality mobile installation for emergency communications. And here we're talking about not only 2 meters, but HF and 6 meter operations as well. So all hams should have such a nice mobile situation, even if it's where you're going to come in and plug into the cigarette lighter and just put a radio on the seat. You should still already have a mobile type capacity to get on the air on 2 meters and 6 meters in HF. In order to do that, we should have a reliable antenna. And the most reliable antenna for HF mobile is the Hustler arrangement, where you have a ball mount that is connected to a metal body of the car, and the normal Hustler 54-inch mast section. Then they put on a coil on the top for the various bands. The mast section itself will give you 6 meter capability, and then by adding the whip coil at the top, you can end up adding 2 meters, not 2 meters, but 10 meters on there, or any of the HF bands on there at the same time. So that's an excellent way to go. Assuming that you have such an emergency setup, then then we can add something portable that might work better than the simple mobile installation for HF communications. Here again, for getting out there and really working 40 meters or 80 meters mobile or portable, you really need to go to a dipole, a good old dipole antenna, which means you need some sort of mast that you can hold it up in the air. Get up 20, 35 feet or so, something in that range, and a regular dipole. It's very, very difficult to beat on 40 meters and 80 meters. Just like when you're getting on your net every morning and with your net antenna, you know how well that works. Go ahead.
Right, it does work very, very well. It's a great antenna. Yeah, so yeah, portable and mobile and all that. Some of the discussions have been people suggesting loops, but there's not one loop isn't. I'm trying to discuss. Come to words here. A loop has many ways it can be, right? I mean, there's well, go ahead. I think you know what I'm saying. AA6DD, K6YYL.
Well, there's a big confusion factor when you just say a loop, because loops come in all sorts of different sizes compared to the wavelength. If you're talking about what's generally referred to as a magnetic loop, that's an antenna that's 1/10 the size of the wavelength or smaller. It has very high currents circulating in it and very high voltages on the tips that come around. Such an antenna can be made efficient, but when you see somebody running a loop that's just sitting on a on a bench, a few feet off the ground. You can make it work by going to Fox Tango 8 and working DX off of it on like 20 meters. That's absolutely true. But is that really an effective emergency communications antenna? 20 meters is not propagating well. It's pretty useless. And we want something that can give us the best performance even under bad conditions when it's an emergency. That turns out to be basically, if we're talking about 20 meters, that means something vertically polarized and up off the ground that'll outperform what our mobile is going to do. So that means going vertically polarized and getting it up as high as possible. Obviously, if we can go up a few hundred feet, horizontal or vertical is going to work good as a DX antenna. But for practical portable operation, we can't get much more than 20 to 30 feet off the ground. And that requires us, for DX purposes on 20 meters, to go vertically polarized. Obviously, for 40 meters, and we're trying to work DX, that would also be vertically polarized. But for emergency local type communications around 2 or 3 states around you, you want to go horizontal so you can send signals straight up, which means, here again, some sort of mast that's 20, 30, 35 feet high, and then like an inverted V wire would be the best way to go. But now, as we might go up to 10 meters or 15 meters or 6 meters, we want to be on the horizon. That requires us to go vertically polarized and a full half-wave antenna. Now here's where the crux becomes somewhat very, very interesting. Let's see, we got some the kitty is up on my desk here and the phone is ringing with probably another ad, but let's see. Hello? Yeah, another ad. Well, we forget about the ads. Let's talk about a 6-meter loop that are full half wavelengths. That is can be a squalo to a sort of shape or a loop sort of shape. And they work extremely well. They can be horizontally polarized or vertically polarized. The best performance for DX, again, is to rotate them up vertically. Now, what everybody should be aware of is the following general statement is absolutely true. For best DX operation or ground wave operation, vertical polarization is always superior on frequencies from 20 meters all the way to 6 meters. The exception to that is for direct wave propagation when you're going portable. You need to match the polarization of the local activity. If your local activity is horizontal, then for direct wave propagation, you need to match what they are. If they're horizontal, you need to match that horizontal to talk to them. But that is not the best for DXing. The best for DXing is to go vertical. So that half-wave loop that is, on 6 meters, it's about, about a meter in diameter. Okay? And there it's just like a dipole. It can be made out of wire, actually. It doesn't have to be made out of something big and thick. If it's a full half wavelength loop all the way around on polarized. So we're actually now running vertical polarization. If you get it up 20 feet, yeah, you're going to work DX on such an antenna. Does that make sense, Kim?
Yes, AA6DD, K6YYL, and that is all modes, right? Because I've seen people comment and saying, well, you need such and such for this mode, horizontal, and this vertical for this mode, and you know, it's their understanding of it, but I wanted you to elaborate on that more, and then also that horizontal is not for everywhere, and vertical is typically here more found for local communication here in Southern California for 6 meters. If you want to elaborate on all that.
Exactly. If I'm in some other state, if I'm in Pennsylvania and all the locals on 6 meters are horizontally polarized, and I'm going portable, I need to rotate over horizontal to work those guys. Can I work DX with that horizontal if I get it up 20 feet? Yeah, I can. And I can work the locals too if I can get it up 20 or 30 feet. But if I can rotate it up vertical, I will actually work more DX because I'll lower my angle of radiation better. And so, yeah, that's what I mean. For direct propagation, which is local, the first 30, 40 miles or so, I need to match what they are. Now, here in Southern California, our local communications has always been vertical, even on single sideband, which makes it convenient for us because our mobiles are all vertical. Our AM signals are vertical, our FM signals are vertical, and our sideband signals are vertical. But if I'm in Pennsylvania, yeah, all the local guys have horizontal beams on 6 meters. And in order to talk to them, I need to rotate the thing over horizontal. When it's the DX comes in, can I still use that horizontal big half-wave loop to work them? Sure. I could even try to put up some that are stacked so that it helps me create a better lower angle horizontal antenna. But here again, if I rotate it up vertical, I can get a lower angle with just one loop. So it becomes a little complicated as to, what are my choices under those circumstances. Go ahead.
AA6DD, K6YYL. Right, and then there was another person mentioned about, well, you need to be, and I forget which way they said, vertical for FM and AM and horizontal for single sideband or something. Maybe I have it vice versa, but either way they were distinguishing, you need to be vertical for this mode and horizontal for that mode. What is your comment on that?
Well, here again, for most places in the country, for local QSOs, you need to be vertical for FM and vertical for AM, but then horizontal for single sideband for local QSOs. And that's true for those areas. I think they would be better off if they'd all follow our example. But the reason, historically, that they're horizontal on sideband is because it's easier to stack beams that way. It's easier for me to have a big HF horizontal antenna and put a 2 meter or 6 meter horizontal beam above it for working sideband, and that's the reason they tend to be that way. Is it best for noise? It happens not to be best for noise. That's the big misnomer. High tension line noises are predominantly horizontal. Ignition noises are predominantly vertical polarized. So here again, which noise you want to try to get rid of? blankers actually get rid of vertical noises easier. The ignition noise is easier. Noise blankers have a harder time reducing high tension line type noises that are predominantly horizontally polarized. Go ahead.
Right, and that's, I live in a city where I have high tension, power pole right practically in my backyard, and people have argued, oh, you should be, horizontal, horizontal, you have so much less noise, I tell them, I've tried both. I know for a fact vertical I have so much less noise. Horizontal, it's terribly noisy. So, and some just don't want to, believe that. They think it's just me, I don't know. But it's true. My vertical is so much less noisy than the horizontal.
That's correct. That's correct. And so, yeah, no, there's this lore out there that vertical is always noisier than horizontal. Well, that lore comes from the fact that they're usually comparing apples and oranges. They're comparing some vertical omni with a horizontal beam. Well, the vertical omni is looking at noise 360 degrees. The horizontal beam is only looking at noise where it's focused at. But if you rotate that same beam vertically polarized, you'll find that if your high tension line noises will drop way down from being otherwise. Go ahead.
AA6DD, K6YYL, yeah, and it's incredible the difference.
Yeah, so that's a very common, these problems are very complicated. There are no simple answers that work all the time. Go ahead.
Right. And so it's good to have, you clarify it because you're such an old timer. A lot of years behind you there and experience for sure. And anything else? I'm trying to think if we touched on everything. We touched on loops because I'm really not familiar with loops, so that's good to hear that. And then verticals and horizontal. And then somebody's talking about for ease of, just being able to bring something portable out in the field and then something just bring it at home. And then, have it for them outside in the backyard, I guess. And that might be what we might refer them to my portable antenna that you made for me, and you can mention about that, and if they want, they can look for that antenna on my K6YYL YouTube channel, the little antenna that you made for me that's the portable one.
Yeah, that one was made specially for you, for your circumstances where you can't get anything really high up off the ground. You don't want it attached to the camper. So that's a good way to go for anybody can watch that, look at that YouTube and see the situation there. But something else I might mention, if I was living back east and I wanted to make a portable station up for 6 meters and 10 meters, one thing that you could build that would be an interesting project is something that would look similar to a vertical with a counterpoises. Okay, so let's say I made a vertical that was loaded that covered 6 meters and something that would look like a hustler, and I'd have screw-on sections to make the antenna go lower in frequency and still have 6 meters on it. Well, I could make something that had a vertical section to it, and then a horizontal counterpoise sloping down. It could stick out directly. It wouldn't have to slope necessarily. I could either make it stick out directly on each side, or make it slope on 30 degrees or 50 degrees, or almost any angle I wanted for that matter, or 45 or something. And then make it so that the counterpoise was switchable, so that I could use half the counterpoise to make the antenna horizontal, or switch it so that the cats are up here fighting on my radio. Let's see if I move frequency.
You're okay, I believe.
Okay, yeah, it looks like I'm okay. So I could actually either manually switch it and push it up, or have a remote little relay that I could switch from the vertical section of the antenna and then use part of the counterpoise as a horizontal dipole. So there I could have both vertical and horizontal polarization. Go ahead.
Very good. AA6DD, K6YYL. Yeah, and there's some cats over there with their shenanigans. So go ahead.
Yeah, the 3 baby kittens are up here on the desk rolling around, fighting each other and knocking everything off onto the floor.
Right. So, okay, anything else? We've touched on a lot of different things, and I hope it's been informative, fun, and educational, because ham radio should always be fun, and Elmering should always be fun and made with, respectful comments and friendliness too. That's a big issue.
Yeah. There's like I say, there's so many wonderful things to experiment with and to try out, and yeah, I for a good 30 years, all my operations was mobile and portable. Of course, I've been on the air now, 56 years, operating all total. So about half of my entire ham experience has always been portable and mobile. And I've always found out that whatever you take portable, you want to try to design it so you can put it up easily and take it down easily. Otherwise, you don't tend to do it. You need to get any portable antenna up off the ground to make it efficient and effective, so it'll launch the signal on the horizon, which invariably means you need to get it up 20 to 30 feet to make it effective. Otherwise, you might as well just have a good high-quality mobile station connected in with everything. Go ahead.
AA6DD, K6YYL. Yeah, and it is exactly like you said. You want something that's easy to set up and easy to, take down, put away, and then relocate to wherever you're going, and or bring it at home and set it up at home again. So definitely a lot of things to think about there, and that's why the antenna that you made me is so great and wonderful. And so go ahead, Will. AA6DD, K6YYL.
Yeah, well, it was made with your particular circumstances in mind. Everybody will have different circumstances that they'll have to deal with. But anytime an antenna is not really super high in the air, the long-haul DXing on 20 meters through 6 meters or 2 meters for that matter is always better vertically polarized laying on the horizon. Obviously, if you're dealing with, and once you launch a signal through the ionosphere, it's multiple polarizations when it comes down on the other end for DX, coming off of the E layer or the D F1 or F2 or theoretical F3 or G layer above it, it rotates in polarization, and it can rotate around and around and be many different polarizations. So there are unusual examples where one polarization will outperform the other off of certain modes of propagation. But generally speaking, those are exceptions and not the general rule where it's many polarizations coming off of it. And so there it's not mode selective so much as what angle the launch angle is. And the launch angle is always lower when you're vertically polarized. So can you do both? If you can do both polarizations and have both polarization diversity, that's wonderful. And that's that gives you another advantage if you can do it. Go ahead.
Yes, AA6DD, K6YYL, very good. It's good to be, versatile.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, like I'm always kidding, but it's not. This stuff is very, very, very complicated. So there's no simplistic answer to any of it. But yet there are answers that will give you the best possibility of success.
Right. Well, thank you, Will. And I think we've touched on a lot, unless you have anything else you want to say.
Well, let me see if there's anything I can think of right offhand that is that is something that I want to experiment with myself that I haven't done after all these years, and that's taking full half-wavelength loops and rotating them up vertically polarized. I think there's some real interesting possibilities, because once you do that, you still can know noises on such an antenna. And such an antenna will be 100% efficient and will be vertically polarized and does not have to be massive for high currents in the loop that super miniaturized 1/10 wavelength loops do have to have. So that's an area of experimentation that I want to do more of. Go ahead.
AA6DD, K6YYL sounds like a lot of interesting things could be found from that. AA6DD, K6YYL.
Yeah, antennas are, we've really only scratched the surface of the developments of antennas. I have hundreds and hundreds of ideas that I still want to do, and not enough time to get there. Go ahead.
Well, at least you have done a lot, so much more than, many of us for sure. AA6DD, K6YYL.
Well, I just want anyone who's coming along to realize that there's so much more development that can be done that hasn't been done. And, that's like I have an antenna working over here in the lab that's working on 2 bands. It's working on 6 meters and 10 meters with a single tune circuit, making the difference between making it work on those 2 bands, and it's actually fairly shrunken in overall dipole wavelength as a dipole. The only difficulty of me publishing the antenna is the coil and capacitor arrangement is very critical on how to put it together. Even an inch change in the wire going to the capacitor moves it a megacycle, and so it's very critical, and so it makes it almost impossible to publish it, to tell somebody how to reproduce it. So sometimes you come up with stuff of that nature that you don't publish.
AA6DD, K6YYL. Very good. Very good.
Okay, Kim. We'll catch you later on 6 meters and on 10 and on 15. And we'll have lots of fun as the cycle goes up, cycle 25.
All right, thank you very much, Will. It's been fun, and I hope you have a great day. AA6DD, K6YYL.
K6YYL, AA6DD, back monitoring 50.300 FM.